I'm not going to dwell on it, but since it was the lead story on Fox and they bulletined it at 8 o'clock this morning, right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, I just wanted to mention a couple of personal experiences with Gordie Howe, the hockey legend who passed away at age 88. Now, he'd been suffering from dementia for the last several years, and many people said that it had gotten to the point where he didn't really even know who he was any longer. He had some experimental surgery done about a year and a half ago, and it allowed him to go out and at least kick a soccer ball around with his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But beyond that, I have a biography that was written by him, and he managed to hold it together long enough to get his thoughts down on paper, and his children had this thing published in 2013, I believe it was. And really, man, a tremendous life story. He could have played baseball as well for the New York Yankees, but he chose to stick with his first love, which was playing hockey, and then he dominated. He doesn't show the scoring records, perhaps, over a course of 25, 26 years in the big leagues that some of the other guys do, but he played in an era when it was a very defensive game. In 1997, he was 69 years old. He was planning on coming out of retirement to play in a minor league game in Syracuse, New York, and I happened to be working for the CBS TV affiliate at the time, and there was so much excitement generated by this because I had seen him a few years earlier. He had a friend who had a home on a nearby lake. So I had seen him earlier in a restaurant a few years before that and had seen this man, and he was so big and muscular, still in his 60s, that I thought, no one's going to mess with this guy if he goes on the ice. So all of my friends and I at work, we thought, we're going to be really cool. We're going to go buy tickets so we can be among those people who actually see Gordie Howe play hockey, and someday we'll be able to tell our grandchildren. Now, the guy played for 35 years in two different leagues, so lots of people saw him, but I don't know about how many people got to see him in person. So we bought the tickets, and then his wife took ill. So he canceled his appearance in that game. And so we were stuck with these useless tickets. We went to the game anyway and watched a bunch of minor leaguers who would all be forgotten within a few years. And then a year later or so, he was able to actually do what he'd promised to do. And at 70, he came out and played for a minor league team in Detroit. But all he did was go out on the ice and skate around for a few seconds and then get back on the bench. And that was his actual play in a game at the age of 70. And then, as I say, from that point on, things neurologically started to go downhill for the man. But just a quick mention of that happening 9 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I wanted to open the program otherwise today with just a quick mention. Speaking of someone who's going to be 70, Donald Trump will be 70 in a few days. Donald Trump, of course, if you didn't know it from all the network news coverage, you think there was only one person running at the moment for president, and she's been piling up all of these so-called endorsements. Did you hear the comments from Dr. Charles Krauthammer about this? He was appearing on the Kelly File, I believe it was last night, over at Fox News, and he was asked about this particular situation. He said, this has all been part of the plan from the Democrats and the media, is to go full court press now for Hillary Clinton.
What does it tell us now? You've got the president endorsing Hillary. You've got Bernie signaling the end is near. And earlier this evening, you had Senator Elizabeth Warren come out full-throatedly in support of Hillary.
This is all a carefully choreographed kabuki play. And I think it's rather well done. It starts with the honoring of Sanders by having him meet with the president, the vice president, the head of the Senate. Then you get the official endorsement, which, as you said, had been recorded already on Tuesday. In a year of 100 surprises in this campaign, this was the least surprising of all developments. Then you get Bernie Sanders coming out, not withdrawing, because that would have been seen as a capitulation. The withdrawal has to wait about a week, and that'll be the D.C. primary. He said, I'll contest that. Then obviously he will step aside. He'll have his meeting with Hillary. They will decide on what the price is for his acquiescence and support, and then there'll be the joint announcement. You could write this script in advance, and everybody's playing his or her part.
And there you go. The Democrats showing a unified field, of course, not so much over on the Republican side, where Eddie Munster, Paul Ryan, and some of the others are still whining about Donald Trump being a racist bigot. I have a couple of thoughts on that this morning. In fact, I'll share with you some of the thoughts of some great Americans, Pat Buchanan being one of them, who was campaigned for many of the things Trump's campaigning for all the way back in the 1990s and didn't get anywhere near as far. Buchanan's daily column, or bi-weekly column, I guess it is, but it's out today, why Trump must not apologize. And he actually cites an old British scholar saying, never retreat, never explain, get it done and let them howl. But he said that was back in the days when England ruled the waves. And of course, they don't do that anymore because now the English apologize for just about everything. He writes, Ryan's remark raises fewer questions about Trump's beliefs than it does about the depths of Ryan's mind. Now, here's something that media doesn't talk about because it doesn't want to talk about it. And politicians who are trying to constantly curry favor with mainstream media don't want to talk about it. But when you see what Trump said about this flaky judge who's part of this La Raza Caca movement, and then you compare it to what else is going on in this country, see which one of these is worse. This is what Buchanan says. We have seen a former president of Mexico curse Trump. That was Vicente Fox who used the F word describing Trump on a television show a few months ago. We have heard Mexican-American journalists and politicians savage him. We have watched Hispanic rioters burn the American flag and flaunt the Mexican flag outside Trump rallies. Now, see, that's considered okay by your buddies over at the mainstream media and even by the cowering cowards like Paul Ryan in Washington. Buchanan goes on to write, we are told Trump provoked these folks to such a degree they are not entirely to blame for their actions. And Mr. Buchanan goes on to say this, yet the same simple suggestion that a Mexican-American judge might also be affected is the textbook definition of a racist comment. The most depressing aspect of this episode is to witness the GOP in full panic, trashing Trump to mollify the media who detest them. Gee, if we only go over and kiss up to the Morning Joe folks, maybe they'll finally like us, even though the evidence of the last 50 years proves media will never give Republicans a break. And then I have this. Michael Mukasey, who worked in the Bush administration, writing at the Wall Street Journal, and he says Trump's claim against the judge is both baseless and squalid, but some in the chorus of critics are not themselves entirely without fault. And then he goes on to describe this. Two statutes bear on recusal of a federal judge. Neither remotely supports Trump's argument. One and part of the other treat recusal for bias in fact. To justify such a finding, the complainant must show that a judge has financial interest in a case or that the judge has a relationship with the parties or lawyers in it. The remaining provision requires a judge to disqualify himself in any proceeding in which this impartiality might reasonably be questioned. So he said, probably not. Curiel will stay on the course of Trump University. However, race, religion, and even gender have been used as a suggested base for reasonably questioning a judge's impartiality, and it usually comes from liberals. A female judge in the Southern District of New York 40 years ago was challenged in a sex discrimination case, as was a Mormon judge in 1984 when he allegedly involved the theocratic power structure of Utah in a case. The challenges, the writer says, were rejected. And then following the death of Judge Antonin Scalia in February, the president nominated Judge Merrick Garland. When some on the left questioned the nomination of a man in his 60s who was of the Jewish faith, the president conceded that Judge Garland is indeed a white guy, but he's a really outstanding jurist. Note the but, which may well have been inserted for the benefit of the questioner and perhaps in a mild jest, but it is nonetheless there, whether meant to represent the president's values or those of the interlocutor. Now, Mukasey goes on to point out he was also attacked as a judge. People were trying to get rid of him on cases because he was a white guy. He served as a judge in the Federal District, Southern District of New York, for 18 years, 1988 to 2006. Now, we brought this hypothetical up the other day. Imagine if President Obama were to nominate a Muslim for the Supreme Court. Would not liberals then be running to Washington and screaming and yelling and saying, well, before he takes office, or before he's confirmed, he has to deny his religious faith, claiming that he will not use it when he actually decides a case. In other words, that he will disavow his faith while he is sitting on the federal bench. They would make the same argument. How is that different than what Donald Trump said when he brought up the fact that he's got a big target on his back because he'd like to build a wall with Mexico? And the judge in his case, he is the son of illegal immigrants. Duh. I mean, how can we ignore all of this? Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. And the crazies are really coming out now. This is from the Washington Free Beacon. Eric Marr, a supervisor in the city of San Francisco, put forth a proposed charter amendment on Tuesday that would allow illegals who have kids that are 18 years or younger in the public school system the right to vote in local school board elections. Maher said he thinks that Trump being on the ballot this November will drive Latinos who are disgusted by his politics to the polls on Election Day. In other words, how can we get more Democrats? Well, here you go. And by the way, if that doesn't work, we'll just promise them more free stuff. Because likely their kids are already getting free lunches at school and all sorts of other benefits. Technically, an illegal alien cannot get benefits. But if you drop a couple of anchor babies, those anchor babies can get benefits. So mom and dad can sit there and use the WIC program as well and guzzle all of the milk meant for the children. But some strange things are happening across the land. And I bring this up because of this I came across yesterday. There is a woman by the name of, and I guess she pronounces it Jill Valletta, Lily Jill Valletta, and she writes for Fox News Latino. And she's a newspaper columnist as well, from what I gather. And she said she has been writing for months that Trump will not win the election and he will not garner Latino support, and that there would be no reason for Latinos to back him. And then a poll came out apparently a couple of days ago, and get this. 37%, according to this poll, 37% of Latinos surveyed say they are planning to vote for Donald Trump if they vote. Shock poll, as they call these things. Why would they do that? Well, it's because of something we brought up the other day. This notion, I have an old next-door neighbor. He is Latino. He is from the island of Cuba originally. He fled Castro's regime and ended up serving in the U.S. Army, and he's now a college professor at St. Bonaventure University. And he has said, there's this view that if you're Latino, you're going to vote in a lump or like a block. And he said it doesn't happen. And then you've got other Latinos who try to say, well, Cubans aren't really Latinos. Now they're trying to put them down, saying, well, they're not the same as the rest of us. I guess because they came to this country and they know what communism is all about and they aren't beggars. They made something out of themselves. But this notion that if you go down to Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and even parts of Nevada, you're going to find people there who have Latino ancestry, but they were living on these lands before there was even a United States. So they have been Americans for 10 generations. They have been around forever. They don't necessarily have anything in common with a guy who is swimming the Rio Grande looking to get here so he can come and put up drywall for 3 cents an hour. And they don't want him here competing with them. But yet media tries to tell you, well, yes, they do. I mean, and they see Donald Trump as insulting them. Look, if I brought it up the other day. If you have a boatload of people coming here from Ireland and sneaking into the country, I'm not going to go out and campaign for them. I'm not going to then pee on the American flag while I wave the Irish tricolor demanding that they be allowed to stay. I want them to leave. I don't know how difficult this is for people to process, but it seems to me it's fairly simple logic. Bill Colley with you this Friday morning. Beautiful weekend coming up. Not nearly as hot as it has been the last few days. You'll likely enjoy it if you need to get outside and do some of the heavy lifting. In fact, perfect weekend for it. We've got plenty more coming up in just a few minutes. Oh, and speaking of people who are just dastardly and despicable, a liberal newspaper columnist in one city says Republicans should be drowned. But see, that's okay because he's a fellow traveler, right? Despite all this organizational effort by the Democrat Party machinery to suddenly swing into high gear behind Hillary Clinton yesterday, apparently some of them are still clods when it comes to dealing with public imagery. And you may be aware of this story that Hillary sent out a tweet after all of this went on yesterday, and the president got behind her. Oh, I endorse the woman I hate so much. She'll be fine for the country. Now that I'm done, she can come continue with the wrecking ball. So Hillary sent out a tweet. Her campaign, I mean, she's not actually doing this herself, right? Her campaign sent out a tweet saying that people could now delete their Trump account. And Trump tweeted back and saying, like, you deleted all of those emails. Oops. Yeah, they put their feet into it. Not that the Clintons have ever walked through it before. 824, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. KLIX, newsradio1310.com. 66 right now. Thank you for spending some time with us. I also would like you to spend some time with Dr. Eric F. Jones. He was with us a few weeks ago on the air, and he practices a holistic systemic approach to wellness, which he's been doing now for 23 years. With master's and doctorate degrees in marriage and family therapy, Dr. Eric F. Jones uses methods of alternative healing, naturopathy, medicinal herbs, nutrition, sound waves, intellectual and cognitive self-regulation, and napathy to help remedy and manage mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual challenges. And he's accepting new patients. He has evening and Saturday appointments available. You can reach his office, 208-731-7178. And I should also remind you, he's on Facebook, Eric F. Jones, Ph.D., mental health and wellness therapist. And just a reminder, he spells Eric with a C at the end, just to clear that up. 25 minutes now after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. In Michigan. Now, this is for all the people who scream and yell about how nasty and mean Donald Trump is and how nasty and mean people in talk radio are. You want to know what liberals are really like? This comes out of a website called, WashingtonExaminer.com, which I read on a regular basis. After a liberal editorial writer said Republican members of the Michigan House of Representatives should be killed, the state speaker of the House is calling for an apology. Now, I've long said this is what liberals have in mind for us. They really, this is their long-term goal, to try to eliminate us any way they can. A fellow by the name of Henderson, who works for the Detroit Free Press, wrote Saturday that GOP members of the House should be rounded up. And then he wrote this: sew them into burlap sacks with rabid animals and toss them into the Straits of the Mackinac. That's harsh, maybe, but isn't that what the Romans or Greeks or some other early practitioners of democracy used to do with solicitous and unprincipled public officials? Well, now he's saying, but, people are taking my words too seriously. Oh, gee willikers, no. And we all know that liberalism is a self-evident truth, of course, so therefore I'm right. I literally believe if I said something like that on the air, there would be people who would demand that I be fired. And in fact, in a couple of times in my radio career, similar things have happened for less. But if you're a lefty, you can get away with it. Oh, he's funny. He wants to kill Republicans. He wants to drown them like kittens. Now let's go pee in the little girl's room. Bill Colley with you this morning, 8:27. Talking about this Clinton machine, Jonathan Turley, who is a constitutional law professor at Washington U. I mean, he's in Washington, D.C., and admits he voted for Barack Obama, but has come to believe Mr. Obama is one of the least, doesn't respect the Constitution in any way. Turley was appearing on television last night, mentioned a lot of these people appear on Fox News because they don't get invited over to MSDNC or Clinton News Network anymore. And Turley went on to say, for all the complaints about Trump University, the Clintons are also involved with a university that may have been a scam.
There's no question that you did have all of this money going and coming from different directions. The one common denominator is, in fact, Mr. Becker, who has involvement with both Laureate and the International Youth Foundation. And there's no question also that Laureate benefited greatly from the association, not just with Bill Clinton, but with Hillary Clinton. This is a company with most of its activities abroad. And to be able to have the picture of Bill Clinton there with the connection to Hillary Clinton, to countries that rely on the United States for foreign aid, have strong relations with the State Department, that's obviously an enormous advantage.
And Laureate did make donations in the Clinton Foundation.
Yes, and the point of my blog column was that there are legitimate concerns here. I mean, for academics, for educators, this company has long been controversial. Now, I'm not a big fan, obviously, of for-profit educational companies, but this company has been repeatedly criticized for making education into a commodity to be sold at the lowest possible cost. It's not something you would normally expect a former president to be associated with. But to have the husband of the Secretary of State with an international company of this kind raises some legitimate questions.
Well, they were poor when they left the White House, so they had to do all this stuff. And they're liberals, so it makes it okay. 29 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Short break ahead in just a couple of minutes. And I've got a lot to talk about this morning. Some of the things ahead, more arguments about transgenderism going on around the country, and warning from a fellow who had his private parts cut off, now says it was a huge mistake. But he says doctors encourage people to do this instead of treating perhaps underlying issues they may have when they think they're a girly when they're actually a guy. Also, we've got a couple of things, thoughts coming up a little bit later in the program as well about creeping Sharia. And ruling yesterday from the Communist Court of Appeals in San Francisco saying there's no right to concealed carry in the Second Amendment. It won't impact us because, of course, we're immune from all of that left-wing, left coast stuff, right?